During a sleepy morning in 1981 in Fukugawa, Tokyo, tragedy would strike. A man named Kawamata Genji would go on a sudden, violent rampage, killing 4 people and injuring 2 more, before finally being subdued and arrested. This event would be known in Japan as the Fukugawa street killings. During his subsequent trial, he would assert that he didn't intentionally kill the victims or had any prior organized plans to do so, but instead his defense asserted that he was under the influence of, quote, poisonous radio waves, or dokudenpa as he called it. He maintained that it was these electromagnetic waves, or denpa, that influenced him to commit his latest murders, which, morbidly enough, is rooted in a real-life modern conspiracy about how our brains are being beamed by invisible rays to mind control us. What I'm trying to say is that Japan did the whole 5G thing decades before Alex Jones thought it was cool. And while Kawamata Genji would be sentenced to life in prison, his usage of the term denpa in his defense would inadvertently get the ball rolling in creating one of the most popular subgenres of Japanese media, the genre of denpa, or Denpa-Kei, a genre of storytelling that's all about the isolation and vulnerability of the human mind. Denpa as a word is a metaphor for disconnection, for being mentally out of sync. And a lot of Denpa stories are all about the damages that come with being out of sync with the rest of society, isolated into your own world with no help. And if you think it sounds like a genre that's all about the coming of age of its characters and how they just need to get out of their shell and see the world, most Denpa narratives are about the pure misery of what societal and personal isolation brings. It's a genre that's meant to be oppressively dark, isolatingly lonely, and surreal in its visuals. And I know what you might be asking. Broski, I've been watching Japanese media for a while now, never heard of this genre. But what if I told you that some of the biggest stories from Japan are Denpa coded, and that you've probably seen one before, way before watching this video? But before I tell you what Denpa is, let me tell you how you can get authentic snacks and food from Japan through the sponsor of today's video, Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. are a monthly snack box service that sends authentic Japanese snacks and food right to your doorstep. And if you're like me and you grew up wanting to try the snacks and food that you saw in your favorite anime or manga, this is a really convenient way to do that. They come absolutely packed with all sorts of snacks and food from Japan. As you can see, I am struggling to frame the shot because I was so afraid that the food would fall out, because like I said, these things are absolutely packed with snacks. And if you're even more like me and you have certain dietary restrictions, Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. boxes do come with these handy booklets that not only tell you about the super cool people that make these snacks, but also what goes into them. For example, I've always wanted to try authentic Japanese mochi, or at least a mochi type snack, but unfortunately a lot of the mochi snacks in these boxes do contain trace elements of gelatin, and since I can't eat anything pork related, they were pretty much off the table. But the Sakura Kit Kats that came in the Tokyo Treat box were completely fine and were fair game for me, which is cool since here in Malaysia you literally can't get any other flavor other than normal chocolate. And if you know anything about Japan, you know that they can get pretty crazy with their Kit Kat flavors. There was also a bunch of other snacks that I didn't know existed in Japan. Like, I had no idea what the heck senbei was, and I was kinda hesitant to try it at first, but after taking a bite, it was pretty good. So yeah, if you have dietary restrictions, these small booklets are a literal lifesaver. Another cool thing about Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. boxes is that each box is themed, and this month's boxes are themed after the Japanese springtime and the blooming sakura trees. So all the snacks are appropriately pink and meant to give you that sweet feeling inside. So if you want to treat yourself or someone you know, you can do so by using my link in the description or in the pinned comment below and use my code Muxedo and get $5 off your first order. Thanks again to Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. for sponsoring this video. Now, back to explaining more about the poisonous radio waves of Denpa. So full disclosure before I continue, there's really no solid definition for what Denpa is. It can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. It's not like my other videos where I can show you the hard fashion behind it to give you guys an idea of what it looks like. The Denpa-Kei genre is very fluid in how it presents itself. So rather than talk about what it is, let me just show you some Denpa narrative tropes and what they mean. And one common trope that you'll see is the isolation of people, especially because of technology. When early Denpa-Kei stories were being made in the 1990s, there was a small concern in Japan at the time with the rapid advancement of technology. And while Japan is usually a pro-technology society, that anxiety mainly manifests in the idea of Muen Shakai, roughly translating to relationless society. It's the idea that you can exist fully within a society or a community, but if you don't bother to cultivate meaningful social ties, your presence within that community can feel hollow and isolating. A really good example of this is in the game Needy Streamer Overload. The game is all about how the player character named Pichan is in charge of helping their friend named Ame in achieving her dream of becoming a top-tier streamer. And to do this, you need to get her in-game follower count up, as well as, and this is what the game's very own Steam page says, to squeeze stupid amounts of super chats out of her donation-happy otaku followers. But outside of the player character, Ame is effectively isolated. She has a community through her chat as an online streamer, and through the power of streaming has the ability to connect and form some kind of social bond with the people that watch her, but because of how impersonal the medium of online streaming inherently is, the connections that she forms are superficial at best. For example, one mechanic that you can do to get Ame's follower count up is by doing something called a breakdown stream, where Ame essentially streams herself crashing out while getting high as a kite, which is not an unheard of concept before. And if you do this enough, Ame will lament the fact that she's effectively become a lol cow, that people only watch her because they get to see a cute girl crash out live and make a fool of herself. She, as a streamer, has effectively become a spectacle. She's surrounded by viewers and has the technology to connect with them, but if you make Ame go down this path, can you really say that people are watching her for her? Add on the fact that personally, Ame is very mentally unstable, with delusions of grandeur made worse or better depending on her follower count. She's effectively in her own world, on her own wavelength that doesn't match up with what you, the player, see. And that's another key point of a lot of Denpa media, is the idea of that incompatible wavelength, that a character is just not on the same mind with his surroundings. And one piece of Denpa media that shows this is the visual novel Saya no Uta, or The Song of Saya. In the game, the MC Fuminori was involved in a car accident that leaves him with a bizarre form of agnosia, which is an actual neurological disorder that affects your ability to process sensory information like touch or sound. Fuminori's agnosia instead leaves him with the side effect that his entire visual world is nothing but blood-red viscera. The world to him appears covered in flesh and gore. Other people look like lumps of misshapen muscle, and normal food tastes and smells terrible to him. And while I'm not going to spoil this visual novel beyond that description because it is considered a cult classic in the visual novel community, I can explain how it's considered part of the Denpa genre. And, well, did you listen to anything that I said? Fuminori is literally on a different wavelength compared to the rest of society due to his condition. The world that he sees is a literal eldritch nightmare, one that he is the only victim of. Where Ame's isolation and mismatched wavelength comes from the result of how technology flattens human intimacy through a screen, Fuminori's isolation and mismatched wavelength comes from his literal brain not being like most others. No one around him will ever understand the literal horrors that he has to see every day. And no one can understand the literal horrors because only his senses have been compromised. Physically, he seems alright. If you were to see him walk down the street, you wouldn't bat an eye to him. But neurologically, he is severed from the people around him. He exists within his community and with a group of close friends, but he is forever in his own world, cut off from making any meaningful connections with people around him, and forever on a wavelength that no one can see for themselves. And that is the subtle terror of the Denpa subgenre. It's meant to ask you what happens when you are alone and you can't even trust your own mind. What happens when the environment and world around you is meant to keep you isolated? And what happens when it feels like you're the only one who's aware of the strangeness going on, but you have no one to go to for help? Would you accept the world that you're in? Would you endeavor to uncover the truth and make a change? After all, it takes a strong person to deny what's right in front of them. Obviously, there are more examples of Denpa media that I have to talk about. For example, Serial Experiments Lane is the quintessential Denpa anime. Just like Needy Streamer Overload, it very much deals with how technology can isolate us and warp our sense of selves and perception. But honestly, this anime has been dissected front and back, and I doubt I can contribute anything meaningful at this point. You also have movies like Perfect Blue, and Paprika, made by the late director Satoshi Kon, which also have been picked clean in terms of video essays and analysis. I like smaller examples because to me they're just more personal and easier to research. I'm more of an in general overview of subcultures and genres guy, because there is one part of Denpa media that I want to talk about, and it's Denpa music, which is nothing at all like the stories I've been showing you. So, I know what you might be thinking. Wait, there's a whole ass music scene to this trippy mindfuck genre? And yeah, there is. But rather than start explaining what it is and how it came to be, let me just show you some snippets of Denpa music for you to get an idea of what it's about. Cause, man, I have no words to describe what you're about to listen to. So, what the heck, right? Okay, in complete aesthetic opposition to Denpa narratives and stories, Denpa music is not really something you would associate with the themes of isolation and incompatibility with society. Funnily enough, they do share some hidden themes. Obviously, the elephant in the room is the style of music. How can you be introspective about the dangers of isolation when you're blasting every color of the spectrum directly into my retinas? But that's kind of the point. Denpa music is characterized by the fact that it makes no fucking sense. It's meant to be strangely chaotic. Where the Denpa genre narratively is about silent isolation and of questioning one's own perception of the world, Denpa music is made to grab your attention and to overwhelm you. But it's also really important for me to mention, just like Denpa stories and narratives, that Denpa music is very fluid in what it is and what it can mean to people. Some Denpa songs can sound like generic anime music, others can be this catchy hyperpop songs, and there are others that straddle the line between surreal art piece and rave music. But more often than not, most songs do share that overly chaotic style. For example, one thing that you'll see in a lot of Denpa song is this constant tag switching. You'll go from normal singing to chiptunes talking very fast segments to outright chaotic visuals and rave type beats all in one video. And that's kind of the stylistic point of Denpa song, because it goes back to the whole Kawamata Genji case from earlier and what the word Denpa means in Japan. If you remember, Kawamata Genji said that he was under the influence of Dokudenpa, or poisonous radio waves, that made him commit the atrocities that he did. That there was some outside force controlling and influencing him. And in this case, because of the weird and surreal way these songs are arranged, they become the poisonous radio waves that influence you. What do I mean? Well, some of you who are still watching might search up some of the music videos whose clips I've been using just to see what happens next. Because of how strange and overwhelming these songs are, and through your own curiosity, the desire to seek them out and keep watching has been planted in your mind. And one major theme in Denpa media is about the vulnerability of the mind and how it can be influenced. It's effectively an internet brainworm. You might not get it, and you're definitely gonna be confused by what you see and hear, but that's kind of the point. You have effectively been hypnotized, put under control by the strangeness of the song, ever motivated to see what happens next. You are effectively under the condition of Denpa, in the same way that Kawamata Genji was, except minus the murder. Now, obviously, how good this effect works will vary from person to person. Some of you that see these clips might just go, what the fuck is this weeb shit? But funnily enough, that is another thing with Denpa song. It started in the underground doujin otaku scene in Akihabara, so it's tied heavily to otaku and moe imagery. But some Denpa artists do know how to disarm you with that cutesy anime imagery, especially with some of the more creepier songs. Because you gotta remember, this genre has been going on since the 1990s, so artists have had plenty of time to get weird with it. It's less about the storytelling and more about the idea of Denpa and how it can be used. It's still very hard though to explain what Denpa music is conceptually, because on a purely superficial level, it does look like generic anime stuff, especially if you didn't know any better. But as with any subgenre and culture, the question is always why though? And why do people even find it interesting in the first place? And to answer that, we have to go back a bit. So the research for this video was kind of difficult, since unlike my other videos about subculture, fashion, and history, Denpa is more of a concept. And even then, it's a concept that changes how it looks depending on who's telling the story or who's singing the song. But one cool thing about researching Denpa is seeing the community effort to catalog not just the stories and songs from the subgenre, but also of real-life people being in that condition. One cool website if you want to read up on anything Denpa related is on the blog simply called Denpa Archive. On it is this person whose hobby is just translating and archiving anything and everything Denpa. And it was a really big help for this video because they also catalog defunct Japanese blogs and social media posts from real life people that are under the condition of Denpa. And some of these posts can get fucking weird, and I don't mean that negatively. It was interesting reading about how people could get influenced by supposed Denpa waves and what it means to be an outsider looking into society that they couldn't feel a part of, and how in turn Japanese society sees them. Reading on this website was at times weird, surreal, and depressing. After everything I've showed you guys, it's easy to forget that though Denpa is primarily a genre of fiction, the term Denpa was used as a derogatory term for people that just looked crazy or people who seemed disconnected from reality. But then it turns out some of these crazy people were just simply suffering from conditions like schizophrenia or BPD and were just unlucky enough to be caught under the crosshairs of the Japanese internet. And when you strip away the surreal visuals and energetic music, what you're left with is an aesthetic. It's vulnerability. A lot of the archive posts on the Denpa archive aren't dramatic manifestos. They're fragmented thoughts, paranoid spirals, lonely observations typed into the void. And what started out as a scary but interesting read for me, I mean, I read some of these at like 1 in the morning, and I'm gonna be honest, some of these pages can look a bit creepy, turned into some small understanding in a way. Yeah, these articles sound like the mad ramblings of an insane person, talking about the different kinds of waves affecting their mind and how God and the Freemasons are talking to them. But then you see the small lines where they say things like how they just want to live earnestly and be happy, and that's where you see the small specks of humanity shining through the isolation that Denpa is known for. Most of these IRL cases of Denpa are just people suffering from extreme loneliness or, like I said, mental illnesses. And I'm definitely not trying to glamorize that. If you're still watching this video and you think being isolated or having BPD is cool, you're definitely taking away the wrong lessons. Denpa narratives are about the pure suffering that loneliness and isolation can bring. In Needy Streamer Overload, there's about 27 different endings and 20 of them are considered bad ones. Even in the endings where Ame quits streaming and gets a normal job, it's heavily implied that she still feels unsatisfied. That even though she gave up on her own delusions of grandeur on becoming a top-tier streamer, she still can't connect to the people around her, and that no one, not even you the player, can meet her on her own wavelength. And she straight up ghosts you in this ending. In the visual novel, Milk Inside a Bag of Milk, Inside of the Bag of Milk, yes, that's the real name of the game, you literally play the voice inside of the mind of a traumatized, depressed girl as she has to do the simple task of going to the convenience store to get some milk. And again, no spoilers, but by the end, you the player just seemingly have to accept that this girl will go to sleep tonight, only to repeat the same heavy cycle tomorrow as she has to go to the store to get milk again, and again, and again, and again, always in the sad state that she's in. And that's the bittersweet appeal of Denpa. It's the story of all of us at our most base nature, to find people on our own wavelength, to be able to tune ourselves in a way that makes the crushing weight of our conditions understandable, even if just for a bit. And failing all of that, it's just the ability to go on, regardless of what you're going through yourself.